program. Okay. The arts education. So arts is program by program. Batch by batch. Yeah. So we just finished a batch of how many people? Two groups, right? We did 250 last year. And this year we have how many subjects? So we just a lot of no, we have for each module. Each module we have 16 modules. There are 6 modules, and we have staff for each module. Plus we have assistant faculty who do the grading, and because us is very rigorous program.
Phase 1 is done in now.
Michael was saying that your program is much more different. Oh, their program is very simple.
So the George is very sharp, right? So he's looking, I'm saying, wow, this is a great program for all that. You know, the program good. I was kind of smiling when I said, I did, so we looking like website. This is very light. Nothing there.
Oh, the ones in
Yeah, very light.
And it's very
very light.
very traditional
Nothing there.
pedagogy.
Egypt is nothing. It's almost like Egypt is nothing. You have to do something.
Yeah.
Egypt is nothing. So you're kind of claiming that you got this great mentor, but it's really sharing benefit.
No, and then our program is totally
They're
different.
getting better even.
Ours too, because, when we saw what we're doing.
I mean, Mike Cloud is sharp. Mike Cloud is sharp. He's using this to build up his brand.
Right. Yes, it was an ICTIEE workshop on moves, and he went there for and he saw my presentation, he says, I need you to share this program in Australia in the next time. Because he said, I need you to share what you're doing.
We are on screen.
उस पे खींच देना फोटो पे उस फ्लैश
Oh,
पे
yeah.
वो क्या
Streamed live to the whole world, I think. Everything is supposed to be streamed, I think.
Oh, no, it's a little delay. Now
Yeah, there's a lag.
now
The delay.
That's for sensors to make it in case you do something inappropriate.
exactly.
5 seconds.
So,
No, it's fun. It's a young lady. Just. Was born in Tanzania. Has family members in She was at Thunderbird, and Thunderbird is a competitor, which is now part of the Arizona State University, of the School of National Training Vermont, where I was dean. And the president of Thunderbird is now the president of George Mason. I mean, just blows you. She's here, she's the representative of AC. I know that here, no, in India too, we should get the graduate student from India to go.
she's the father's one.
I guess so. I mean, and she found out a close friend of hers, works for the president of George Mason University, who's from Nigeria, from Lagos.
Hans is also part of the UNESCO ICTIEE in China. Advisory board. Because we were sort of brainstorming about doing a similar thing in India. Similar to what China is doing.
Well, I'll be with them in March. Okay, and there are a couple of people that come with personal. Well, let me just let you, the answer is, can I facilitate a connection? But of course, I mean, we know each other, we're brothers and sisters.
No,
you
but it
know?
takes time. They need to.
Well, it's, I mean, you have some longer conversation.
But we need to
Yes.
start the
Yes,
conversation.
this is a good friend.
Yesterday, you had met here, at the banquet we met.
We just, I just told him, we just met, he's a close friend. You know, in this context, with the last.
You are with us, no?
I am, yes.
Yes.
I do, yes. I've used everything in Bangalore the last
Or
year.
Bangalore.
No, it's good. No, we just spent a nice day. It was beautiful. Yeah.
The other one is like the nine mountains stuff.
4:15, it said. Bell, where's your bell?
Yes.
For both of them.
Okay,
I understand.
okay.
Not enough because we haven't figured this out. Very, very, it's written, it's written by a lawyer. And a lawyer. Just ask you.
इसको तो मैं भेज रहा हूँ सर के हिसाब से उसको बात कर लेंगे मेरे साथ दिख रहा है इससे अच्छा छोड़ेगा किससे छोड़ेगा ड्रॉप कर सकते हो ना
कितने आदमी थे सरदार मैंने गिनती नहीं किया बंदूक के साथ
अबे
Any reason to come back
रिकॉर्डिंग हो रही है
unless something happens with
कितने आदमी थे
I don't
मरवा हुए
Yeah, that's fine. Because I need to
Yes, absolutely. We'll be together.
Where, which city?
We love connections, you know.
Oh.
Dr. Shinai. Dikhao? Dr. Shinai. Dr. Shinai, Shinai.
Yeah.
ऐसे बैठना कॉन्फ्रेंस में
She works for them, but she's their India representative to recruit graduates.
Yeah.
For Arizona State, and sponsored the event. And she wants to work with some place
So
called
we
Thunderbird.
do also, we do consulting.
They've just integrated. I've been to Thunderbird too, and it's interesting, the president of that is now president of George Mason.
It's to get this.
And it's just interesting, the connection, you know, it's just exactly, and it was in contact with
But it's a long, it's 8 months program, part of the day. It's part face-to-face and part online.
But there was the business orientation, where these others were more the social science.
It depends on the location. We'll
So anyway, it's just
Of course, we need to, for the first part, we need to
Very
bring in the professors, the instructors.
So I
And then the other, the second phase, and third phase is online.
exactly.
Takes care of us.
And then all part of.
If you want to host one, yes, well, I can send you a proposal, if you send me your interest, I can send you a
That's
proposal.
what I hear.
It's allowed if you use it. Yeah. Yes. Yes, but this program is both, it's.
You've been there in that workshop.
So the first, there's
What
two
happened
phases.
was-
The first phase is presentation, face to face, and the second and third phase on the online. We need to have a minimum of, depending on, when we hold it, for example, we're doing it now in China, in July. And they want to do all the training, all the courses, modules, essential. So it's going to be 2 week intensive. And their cost is about $1,500 per person. In US dollars, for the whole program.
Wow.
8 months long.
Oh, very.
So in order to, for that, I can show you the cost, what it costs. It's no secret. We're not making money, it's just cover the basic, the
All
basic costs.
interconnected world.
And,
Isn't it?
what we do is we send you a proposal, and you tell us when you want it to schedule, because we need time to, and time to schedule, the instructors and the time. Right now, we have 2018 covered.
All
So
right.
if you would like
Oh,
to
oh,
participate,
good.
you can come to the China,
Oh.
they will be allowing people
Sure, I know them, I
from other
worked with
places
them.
to,
Exactly.
at no cost whatsoever.
He supports
So it's
GDC.
2 weeks in July, middle of July. Yeah.
So once I go back, I.
Right,
So
right, yeah.
if you get acquainted with the program,
That's right.
then
No, I know.
perhaps you can have more, criteria, more.
But, next time I'm going to get in GDC.
So you have experience. Oh, excellent.
You may, he would be very interested to get to know you, maybe you can find a business.
You can become an instructor.
Toronto. He's the
No,
CEO
right to me,
of
because I'm the one
And he's a
I'm
partner.
coordinating that with Beijing University.
Tom Lee.
And as soon as you can, because I have to inform
Awesome.
them that you would like to come to
Oh,
the
you're,
training.
okay.
So we have to.
What happened
space
is about 2-3 years ago,
And then it would be also an opportunity to network.
is college. Why you calling?
It's,
You know, Brooklyn College.
Yes, yes.
Just
yeah,
change
but
that.
in
Just
in
change
that
it all the
case,
time.
No, that's right.
Yeah,
$100,000.
they organize
$1,500.
seminar on.
just trip, nothing else.
Went there and then,
Because
this
they
was
are,
sponsored by
they cannot
company.
charge money.
Sure, the government has certain programs.
This university is public, it's government university, so they cannot charge all the people. But they will allow other people to come. But only a selected number, they cannot invite everybody else. But if you're interested, I can, tell them that you're
Okay,
interested.
so, I mean, all is a personal friend, I don't want to talk, you know what I mean? Yeah, yeah. Can I say that we talk? Yeah. And he knows you. Oh, okay.
The reason is why United States.
It's, I have some,
Likes my
results of the course. It's been very
Well,
successful.
one of the, that's, this is another fascinating
We're
point,
doing two ways,
because I.
one in South America, Argentina, and one in China. I also have proposals for Mexico for 2019, Peru, also South America.
China now.
So it's not confirmed. They already have the proposals, they have not confirmed. But if you would like to schedule one in one institution, perhaps you could invite other people from other universities.
Yeah, they agree. I mean, you know, this is one of the questions, I'll introduce you personally, but he would come give it, you know, they can do Marquette University.
Yeah.
I was there, it was a connection there, but you know, Bob, who was the, he's the one that invited me to Marquette and now
If
Florida.
you go to this
They have a
website,
connection.
in the what type of-
Let
let me show you that one. I have one, they go that. 20% left.
I don't, you may have left, I don't know.
Okay, there's a specific website we create for the course.
क्या कर रहे हो राजू? क्या कर रहे हो? कुछ बताओ यार, चल रहा है तो बताओ यार, चलेगा? वैष्णो देवी जबकि मिले कटा दो, जबकि भी मिले टिकट कटा दो।
कल परसों बताता हूँ फाइनल
कल
कर
परसों बता दो।
पक्की बात है, आप कह दिए आप घूमने चलना
It's handwritten from the board. Yeah. We talk about the challenges. Okay. So best practices. Yeah. What are the most things that are on the board? Yeah. Yeah. I sure. I just think of you want to.
These are the three phases. These are the four modules.
Email me that picture also, sure, on WhatsApp or something. Email me. That's good. I'm glad you put it here. I think that, and it's about few of the things, this process from them.
This is the application I showed is for this module. Beijing. Teaching methods and theory modules, practice modules, and then the project. The professors who attend this project, they have to, this course, they need to implement an innovation in the classroom, and then the final phase is to write a paper. We presented that, for example, here in Wisconsin, so some other peer review. And then there's elective modules that the school or the host will choose. I China is going to select, but it can be some of them. This is how it's done. So you have information there. Students will be expected to better program, be supported with education and personal. And then the college and we see some of the professors. And if 3 or more instructors during the course, they have a discount. Yes. Oh, yeah, yeah. It's small size. It could print out in a larger size with bigger font. But this is quite, and it's a step by step guide. We asked you to think like this and send it to us. Oh, I have to figure out what. Well, in Puerto Rico, it cost me $8 to print this, each one. $8. But you can download and you can have it printed. Yeah, exactly.
Are they interviews? What are you doing?
Yeah.
What you want to ask me?
All the time, you like the.
What education you have? What are you
Oh,
doing?
yes, yes. That's the purpose. Serve as
I hope the other person understands. Where am I going?
Porter Street.
Oh, that's the one, yes.
So my bad.
You have students here? Yeah.
Well, I would have to make it to you then. Yeah. But I need to find out how much. Like how many copies? 20. 40. Send me a note afterwards. Please quote me for the copies and I can send it to you. And I can also print it. I was using this. Yeah. Yeah. Oh. If you could, maybe you can print it for me. We can do business. Yes. I also have the Spanish version and somebody in China is translating to Chinese. Because they were interested in it. Yeah. Yeah, the one that is metal, right?
Yeah, yeah.
This is the fastest I could print for the coming year.
So the key also including following not main. One is academic leadership on the back of read for academic leadership of the back.
If you print it in a bit larger font, it
And have some faculty ability to meet the talent. Third one is research and versus teach. Research. Fourth one is multidisciplinary approach in the curriculum.
so when we
We need 5 months.
the 11th of January, yes. I did some Jaipur last year, but not this year. I was a couple of years ago.
I think I had this check.
Yeah, it was amazing, amazing. It was, no, no. It's a pillar that's 600 years ago. So that will be. Until today, it's standing, nothing will affect it. There will be no effect of weather on the tire. Important tradition. This format was designed for a 8.5 by 11. So this is small font. It's not a process. I just had it printed like this. Easy to get. Easy to write.
This is special thing. I wanted to get the last.
It's not meant to be so heavy. Mostly because the process do this.
Oh, I don't say. Where do you prefer? There?
Here.
Yeah.
Oh, here. No, we had a pleasure to speak with one another. And hopefully, and to describe, yes, absolutely. Very interesting organization. It's a pleasure to meet you. Very interesting background you shared. Very different cultural, including Poland.
That also one part of I didn't really give myself.
Okay. Well, maybe we need a nice glass of wine together. Very nice. I'll double check. Would you be so kind, because I'd like to invite you to. I have to see, I mean, you may have used it. This is my email. Some of the information I just. I'm in the US. Outside of Washington. Exactly, yeah, you know, no, that's it. Okay, beautiful.
Krishna wanted to.
You and I are very.
गूगल है एक्चुअली मुझे भी नहीं पता क्या सॉफ्टवेयर होता है सॉफ्टवेयर के थ्रू चलता है लाइक गूगल वो किया वेबकैम ऑन हाँ जी एक्चुअली सॉफ्टवेयर लगाया वो ये जो लाइक इधर क्यों समझ नहीं ऐसे गूगल सर्च करने से भी मिल जाएगा हम एक्चुअली कभी किया नहीं ना नहीं तो मैं भी बता देता हूँ गूगल हैंगेट्स है कुछ हैंग आउट ये गूगल का ही फीचर्स है गूगल हैंग्स दिस अच्छा इसमें ब्रॉडकास्ट फीचर है ओके वेरी सिंपल
Yeah. It's going right, no? Yeah. He from Raj. It's the same. We have it
Now, yeah. Not just very much. No, it's not. For the live, network is that wireless. The Java is that wireless. It's a lag. तो फिर कंटिन्यू चला सिर्फ लंच ब्रेक पे ही स्टॉप हुआ
Yesterday,
3 days
it's a very familiar high fives. We have biotechnology. And then we move since last year.
What is the channel called? Again, you can sound
Your contact is really
Let's try this contact.
Yeah,
So you, okay.
Nobody sitting at home.
Created the reputation on So let me give you the example of ASU, where we want to introduce it to the yeah, exactly. We are big, but we are big because we want to collect politician dollars. Those budgets are very X number of dollars, X number of publications, X number of scientists. Very easy. You as an individual sort of we can design metrics.
Hello. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Great to see we still have people in the 2 digits and more than 2 digits. So I will invite our Vice Chancellor to say a few words.
Few words, no?
Krishna, the bell is ready. Can't forget it. Ladies and gentlemen, I think the winding up and the fog which still played spoil sport on day one has come back in again. So the sun has disappeared and it's getting cold and one of those dreary days again. But thank you for coming. Thank you for being here with us. And Krishna and colleagues, thank you for everything. For these last 72 hours of excitement. It's going to be deja vu once you guys exit tomorrow early morning. Hope your flight takes off on time. There's no problems there. But we will continue at Bennett and we'll think about you guys, about the time you spent with us, about the conversations, and more importantly, about the very big dinner that we had that night. And where we saw you shaking a leg. Yeah, that's guys. A lot of you guys missed it that night. Okay, Krishna shaking a leg. So anyway, thanks once again. Thank you very much. Deepak. So I will invite our Dean, Professor Toli. No, then in the last we say that what is the final recommendations.
So you want me to say thank you after the recommendation? Okay, so let me take a minute to just thank, and we can close with the technical because I think Krishna should have the last word. No one else, right? Yes. So yeah, so this is really a culmination and in some ways a beginning for us. Thoroughly enjoyed it. In fact, all the students are not here, but the students also enjoyed it. All 30 of them were here. So let me start by thanking first Judge, Krishna and Deepak. You know, in India we praise the lords. So Deepak is also the sun lord. Krishna, of course, all of you know. Judge is the Trimurti, right? So, Brahma, Vishnu, so we thank them. And of course, all the visitors, I should call colleagues from outside who come all the way from states. It's been a real pleasure. In fact, believe me, we've enjoyed it. Because sometimes when we get out of our own technical areas and discuss something which is relevant to everyone, you have more of an interest. So many perspectives coming into it. My young faculty has been very enthused. Thank you to them. Thank you, my heads. Again, Deepak, of course, as one, but my other heads have also participated. Research scholars, students, and behind the scenes, the people, let me say, the sponsors that we always miss out, but these are the guys who make it possible for us. Very special thanks. I don't know any sponsors are here right now. But really, thank you for them. And I like the way Krishna said, it's for the year round, it is not for an event. So you are there with them in the hearts for a long time. And I think through the sponsors, both the industrial and the academic, these are the partnerships we have to build up. Lastly, behind the scenes, of course, a lot of administrative people have done a lot of hard work. The media also, yeah, media ladies are not here today. Bennett is a media house, but within Bennett Cornell University, there's a section, they have helped us a lot. The security people, the housekeeping, so I really thank them from the bottom of my heart. For me, it's been a pleasure because organizing these things is not a necessity. It's actually a pleasure, and you really gain when you think of it as such. It's very easy to say that we're going to disseminate and hold a conference, but at the end we must measure by what do we gain, and I truly have gained from this. Thank you so much again, and big hand to all of you really for really staying back. And I'm handing over to Krishna with no bells attached. People should not dream of any bells now.
Thank you, everybody, and thank you all for your patience and being at this last stretch. I think we want to do a little bit of documentation about what we have discussed in these 3 days. ICTIEE is the ecosystem, as you all know. It's an ecosystem. It's the air, the sun, the good things that come, that we breathe in. An ecosystem for engineering education, for institutions that choose to participate in that ecosystem. There's good weather, good ecosystem out there. Some institutions may not have the ability to absorb the good things from the ecosystem. But our job is to create that ecosystem and hope that and then give the
institutions, a little bit of mentoring in how to benefit from that ecosystem. And we have seen over the past 10 years that this is beginning to happen. With the right combination of leadership within the institution, where you have the people who control the money, those who control the academics, and a few leaders, they are much more able to quickly realize the value of this ecosystem and benefit from it. Others are a little bit slower, and we have seen examples of that over the years. Gradually, hey, look, all this great stuff that I can get by participating in various IUC ecosystem aspects of the IUC ecosystem. So those of you out there who are at different stages of benefiting from the ecosystem, I welcome you to continue to try to understand what these elements of the ecosystem are, continue to be part of it, and we're going to continue to build different parts of the ecosystem. One important part of the ecosystem that I think we want to push, which we are very weak in, is industry connections. And we're going to try to push all our consortium colleges with a simple suggestion. Some of you might have had a discussion in the panel discussions. Simple suggestion. Look for 5 alums of yours, 5 recent graduates of yours, who graduated just 5 years ago, and enthusiastic energy alums, and make them into a small advisory group, just 5. Okay, so we have now 70 colleges, now 120 in fact. If each of them brings us 5 such people, we have 600 industry people who can be mentors, observers, guides, all the things that we're doing. They will bring back the fresh energy because they've gone out 5 years ago and they have seen the reality out there. But they can still connect with the youngsters who are still in the college. So they come back and say, hey, look, we need to change this or that. And that way transformation will start beginning to happen. So that's an important suggestion to every one of the colleges that is still here, but I'll be starting to connect with them over email and so on. But as you all know, this is a movement. It is not just one event. It's a movement. Most of our work happens between these events, not at the events. By the time the event is planned, the papers come in, we just do autopilot. These things happen to lead and goes on. But the thinking, this planning happened between events. So now we go back after the end of this week, start spinning our wheels again for next year. And what we have found is institutions are beginning to understand that too. And there's a transition happening with some institutions who need to realize that not only can you benefit from the ecosystem by taking from the ecosystem that's around, but we can also benefit by bringing back to the ecosystem and enriching the ecosystem further to benefit others who may be not as far along. And by giving, you're also getting a lot more. It's just like when you teach, that's when you really understand the subject. When you're giving back to the ecosystem, then you really get the benefits of the ecosystem that's out there. So, high philosophy, but I think that's really where we are. And we hope that we can continue to go in that mode. I'm going to call on one person from each of these sessions, pull up the slides, and talk a little bit about the ecosystem that you talked about in each of your sessions.
So, Professor Saxena is not here. I will.
Yeah, you can go with Saxena's first here.
Okay, so this is about curriculum panel. They have some key recommendations. They say reduction in credit hour requirements in the BTech programs and load elements of a well-designed curriculum that is responsive to stakeholder needs. So they want further reduction, and that is a common point they have found out, that there should be further reduction in the credit hours. The need to create flexibility to accommodate multidisciplinary education and specialization in emerging areas, as well as to accommodate student interests in entrepreneurship and innovation. So in some institutions that is already happening, but some are moving towards that. A role of humanities education and engineering education for creating awareness of societal relevance of engineering education. Student feedback on the curricula at their institutions. Some examples of ongoing curriculum development exercises. So that's what they're saying, that they feel that the new curriculum development exercises are aware of the needs and some progress on all fronts is happening, but more is needed. So that is about curriculum. Now I will call upon Archana.
Anybody want to add or comment on what you just heard for the curriculum? This is Archana.
Yeah, so on January 5th, we had a session, paper presentation session on dynamic class, student engagement, project-based learning, and engineering education research. There were about 8 papers presented, and wherein the faculty employed various techniques for active learning and student engagement, including effective use of tutorials. Somebody pointed out on team-based learning to teach machine design courses, collaborative learning, use of collaborative learning to engage students more in classes. Faculty members from KLE Tech said how they used cut section models actually, to teach some courses, and then design thinking through epics. There were 3 papers on that. And all of them indicated and said that there was significant improvement in students' engagement and performance, and that was reported unanimously by several faculty members in this paper presentation session. We had a panel discussion and presentations on project-based thinking today, and I, Ashok Agrawal and Rajan Chauhan were present. We presented our views on collaborative learning and project-based thinking, and then we had a discussion on, there were 3 focus discussions on 3 topics, which was while designing and mentoring projects, what are the 3 most important things to be kept in mind? And the groups deliberated, and they said there were some of the outcomes of the discussion, that forming teams, clarity of outcomes of projects, their scope, and design thinking process. This was to be kept in mind, 3 most important things, and there are more than that because these are the outcomes of various groups discussions. What are the 3 challenges? Cohesion in team members, measuring outcomes, especially in multidisciplinary projects, and opening deadlocks. Which types of projects should be used for at undergrad level, exploratory, applied, or research-oriented? And the group said and deliberated and concluded that it depends on the level of the students. They said that at first-year level, it could be maybe exploratory in nature. Later on, applied, and much higher, that is at postgraduate levels, we can have research-oriented projects too. Thank you.
Thank you, Archana. Any comments, questions? Okay, so what we have tried, as you can see from these presentations, is a different type of a conference. I don't know if it has ended up being a different type of conference, or it's just became same as before. But let us now go to institutional data Shetty.
So we have max of 2 minutes per hour. Ashok Setar was the leader, actually. We had presentation from Team Sumit and a few others. And people were passionate about a few things. If you really look at building a good institution, academic leadership is the key. So all the presentation really showed that the institution with a good leadership really succeeded. In fact, the example was set by Dr. Ashok Setar, how his institution succeeded in leading with a good leadership. Level. In fact, Dean Sunit talked about building the new institution by hiring good type of faculty, giving them a good opportunity for research and teaching. So there was one major area, academic leadership. Then there had been group discussions, and participants talked about how do we enhance the faculty ability to meet these challenges, and a balance between research and teaching. And there are a lot of discussion about that, because the balance between research and teaching varies from institution to institution, whether it is affiliated institution, or whether it is autonomous institution, or whether it is much more research-based institution, because it depends on the teaching load and all those responsibility of the faculty. That was a major topic. Another topic was multidisciplinary approach in curriculum, because that is a challenge faculty face, how to create multidisciplinary teams. That is not uniform, it is varies. And again, another challenges, and people think which is also important, is industrial exposure to students, so that students have the ability to do these industry-sponsored real-life projects as a part of the curriculum, which is not uniform because some of the institutions have so many projects, but industrial sponsorship is difficult to get for all those projects. So these were some of the areas which we touched upon. There may be others.
Yeah, anybody else wants to comment? Let me add, please.
Like to add that yes, earlier this was a position that industrial exposure to students was a limitation. But recently, I am from industry, I am from Air India. Recently, so many students have been, our organization has been forced to provide training to the industrial students. And I think now the government is making this kind of provision that the organizations have to take students as trainees and give them appropriate training so that this deficiency of students not being up to the level of industry is taken care of. And it is in progress, and so many students, initially, yes, first 1 or 2 months, there was a gap. They were very defensive, but now we are finding that yes, they are picking up the things. We have to give them time to understand, to come up, bridge the gap which is between the industry expectations and what is their performance.
This part of CSR, how does this?
It is.
CSR
was also there. CSR was also there, but yes, there was a directive also. There was a danda that yes, you have to provide this thing to the students. Yeah. Otherwise,
thank you, sir.
Especially in private sector, the reluctance is there to take students. As compared to that, the public sectors and government sector, they are more open. Once they get the directive and the permission, they are willing to take students.
One of the things, a comment I want to make on the Kalyan.
One thing is, yes, on one side, yes, the industry industry engagement is required. But on another note, we have in the academic institutions itself, we have if you consider academic institutions as an industry, because in India we have 3,549 engineering colleges, and they all have labs, at least many of them. So if you consider the amount of investment that is going into these, that's more than 6,000 crores per year. It's 6,000 crores of money that's being spent in these many institutions. That's a big industry by itself. And what percentage of this purchases are being driven by academic institutions? Which means what percentage of these products are at least designed? The users are academicians, the users are students, but that's not built. That's built by industry. That's neither built by academicians nor by the students. I think that is a big opportunity. I think that should be explored.
Thank you. So there is this big dimension of industry involvement. I think that's that's in the minds of all the academicians, and so now we have our new Pandit with his key points.
Okay. Our session was on entrepreneurship, and a couple of points that really emerged as a discussion point, and what we ended with was that societal changes are really supporting and necessitating entrepreneurial thinking, because instead of so many kids, there's only one kid, he is pampered, and he doesn't even want to listen to parents. So he doesn't want a boss in his working life. So he wants to be an entrepreneur. And to be able to do that well, we would want it to be something that is taught, understood, certified, and learned. So that is the change. Because of society, a lot of things are happening. Institutions and academic institutions want to introduce the entrepreneurship as a course. They want it, how to go about it and all that. There are good examples, and people have plugged in onto, like Raji, how he has done it. Done it itself has all the 4 semesters they have something. So how to go about doing it is what these academicians are planning to do it. From the students' point of view, they do want to take such courses. For example, at ICTIEE, 25 students wanted it. And the only thing that we discussed was if there's a class of 80, are all 80 want to be entrepreneurs? Who will work for them? Where the difference lies that your entrepreneurial thinking makes you add value. You might be doing a job, but you do a better job because you have that thinking. So that's the takeaway that we had from the session. Thank you.
Thank you, Anil. Anil has worked for many, many years with General Electric, big industry leader, and he has helped here along with Ravi and others who will show up in Madurai. Have the last year or so spent meeting every 2 weeks online, trying to build up this core of industry teaching fellows. So now we have Pratibha.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's my pleasure to present what we discussed in our panel, and we were 4 of us in the panel, and a fairly large group of students, I should say. Each of us give an introduction to engineering educational research in general and also specifically. The first topic, the role of DBLR. DBLR stands for Discipline-Based Education Researcher in Engineering Education Research, presented by Sohan. He introduced how all of the disciplined education, engineering faculty members are in the transition to become discipline-based education researchers. So anyone who is teaching a course in an engineering college, if he is or she is involved in research, and then he is going to be becoming a discipline-based educational researcher. That is the second level. And then the third level is becoming ambassadors and also further on the experts. And Dr. Joshi presented a short episode, a case study of engineering education research at KLU Tech. And his highlight ideas where how they have introduced education research from the scratch, and then later on going up to the level of a PhD program in engineering research. And I myself introduced functional development through action research in engineering education. Action research is being done in various areas of, and there we say a particular problem is addressed by a classroom teacher in order to improve upon learning experiences of students. And I focused on the steps involved in it, and also how it benefits not only the teacher, not only the student, but also the institution as well as society. And lastly, Vinay Tuketia from this university talked about best practices in engineering education research. And he stressed upon the need for engineering education research at the undergraduate level, how it is important for them to know the scientific methods involved in education research in order to develop their own computer science programming skills. And later on, we had some questions on all of these topics that we had covered. And finally, we wanted to get something concrete from the participants to know as to what, as the panel members, or in general as ICTIEE, can do in order to promote engineering education research in general. And the question was, how can ICTIEE help you to increase your interest in ER? There were many views about that, and the major idea that came out of it was we have to help create a recognition for engineering education research beyond ICTIEE. Of course, ICTIEE is doing a great job in disseminating the information received from research in terms of conferences and journals and having webinars and listening to webcasts, etc. But what we need to do, perhaps, is more in the area of publicizing this particular engineering education research field, especially to the bodies who recognize these research papers in order to promote individuals' accomplishments. Thank you.
Thank you, Pratibha. So Pratibha comes to us all the way from Australia with a strong background in the scholarship and research in higher education. And I think some very good points you made. Anybody want to comment on this particular discussion? I think in particular, I think something that is another action item that I would suggest is we have had this combined 200 papers. And if we can break them down by discipline and have one webinar in each discipline, bring back those authors, we can get the webinars and follow up on some of the discussions that we had here, to building a community of discipline-based researchers, which might be thinking about that. Thank you. Thank you, Pratibha.
Thank you.
Who do we have here? It's Shazbina.
Good afternoon, everyone. Before I just talk about this, I want to talk about briefly about the new format that we decided to incorporate this time in the discussions. So what Krishna had proposed, that instead of experts just giving a presentation and then asking for 1 or 2 questions, we should make very brief presentations of 12 minutes and then divide the participants into small groups, each with a question at hand to discuss deep and then come back with recommendations. And so I think I wanted to first thank Krishna for the new format. It was very successful, and the students enjoyed it very much. Participants felt that it was very useful. So this particular session, we had the 4 presenters. I was not a presenter there, I was just the lead person. So the first session we had was very interesting by Bernadette. We have another slide where the faculty was there, but I think that's not there, right? The title slide.
Go back.
Oh, go back. Wait, this one. So Bernadette from Michigan State University. She presented her paper was on how to incorporate small activities in your routine classes and prepare students for employment, because students not being ready for employment is a big issue. And he suggested some small strategies of asking, interviews, having mock interviews within the classroom, preparing them, just asking them, even making them start to think about what the industry wants, how I'm going to, present myself, etc. So the next paper was by Sally Paglu, and she talked about some simple strategies for engaging students in classroom. She talked about 5 specific strategies and demonstrated examples, and so the participants found that very useful. Then we had David, who talked about the final projects, final year projects or final projects, 2 semester projects, how to manage them and how to make them more effective. And finally, we had Krishna Tyagarajan, who talked about, and his presentation was very interesting. He talked about a lot of little points for making the classroom delivery lively and animated, and also he just showed how to motivate the students. He started with a very beautiful pictures that you can start your lecture with and connect the scientists with the subject that you are teaching, so the student get motivated on that. On the whole, the session was very successful, and the participants really enjoyed.
Thank you, Veena. Of course, Veena needs no reintroduction. Everybody knows her. So she is our guru for the teacher certification program, which is picking up in a large way this year again. So, do you have anything more? I thought you had assessment, right? That's
yes.
Something that you were on. Technology, anything we have.
So we had a session we just concluded
three presentations in the beginning. Kalyan talked about remote labs. Doug talked about general aspects of technology. And I presented specific things that I do in my class. And then we had a very lively discussion on this topic. Opinions ranged from how it could be, new technology could be almost detrimental to the learning process, to how we cannot live without it. And so, but it was a very interesting discussion, very lively discussion. We discussed three questions here. One was about what are the technologies we have available in the Indian scenario. And there were a few suggestions here in terms of standardization and more specific suggestions on how we can use Google Forms, online scheduler, and so on. The other question we talked about was how all of us can prepare for transition to adopting new technology, modern technology in education. Well, pretty much people thought that students don't need transition. We, as educators, need to be educated. And that we need to implement technology, not necessarily in the entire program, but in certain courses where it fits better. And finally, we talked about labs, which how we should use your lab resources effectively. And of course, one line of thought was that practical training, hands-on training should not be diluted, but also technology can supplement learning, the practical experience. So it's a very interesting session, and we could have gone on for much longer.
Thank you, Anil. Anil is from Penn State, and he himself teaches huge classes using technology, hundreds of students. So yeah, 400 classes.
Monday I start teaching.
Monday we start teaching again this section. And in their group they had another stalwart of Kalyan Ram, who is a world global leader actually in remote labs, and he demonstrated a lab that he had built for BITS Pilani in Rajasthan, remotely accessing to do experiments right now, right up here in the workshop that they were in. So the potential for doing actual experiments, not virtual experiments, actual experiments in different labs around the country, around the world, can be built up. And so Kalyan Ram actually is heading up, along with Michael, our annual conference in remote labs, which is going to come to India 2019 February, and we will work with them and make that a reality. So thank you, Anil and Kalyan and the team.
Anil also teaches about
Okay, so I guess on the last one, I would like to retitle this, instead of saying outcomes assessment, I'd like to say it is necessary evil in engineering education, because nobody likes to do assessment. We all like to teach, but assessment is the least favorite part of our academic life. So there were three presenters. I presented on using evolution versus creationism in assessment, which happens to be the topic of interest in the United States a lot these days. And then Veena talked about plagiarism and ethical behavior in the classroom. And then Nidhi talked about 21st century learners. So at the end, we initially started with about 5 people in the audience. And within a few minutes, the entire classroom was full. I think we had about 60 people or so at the end of the presentation. And it was a very lively discussion because of several reasons. Outcomes assessment in a classroom is not easy if you're not given full control over the entire course. And that theme appeared over and over again in our discussions. So if you look at the outcome from our discussions, faculty needs to take ownership for designing assessment and rubrics. And clearly, this is not going to be possible with the structure that the Indian institutions have. The autonomous institutions have little or no problems, but if you're not autonomous, then you're at the mercy of universities that you're affiliated with, and they set the curriculum, and the curriculum, in most cases that I've seen, especially in the area of civil engineering and mechanical engineering, is highly outdated. And if you want to make it contemporary, it makes it extremely difficult, which means you are teaching two things. If you want to be up to date, you're teaching things that meet the needs of taking the exams at the end of the semester, and then while you're also teaching other things that are contemporary and useful from an employability point of view. Then the other big issue that we discussed, and which is very close to Rina and Claire's heart, is the issue of incorporating ethical behavior in the classroom, which is not easy, because you have to start leading by example. And even in the ICTIEE certification program, unfortunately, we have had cases where certain faculty, not a very large number, but nevertheless a certain number of faculty engaged in plagiarism. And if you don't lead by example, you really cannot tell the students to be honest and ethical. So we spend a fair amount of time discussing exactly how to minimize plagiarism and other unethical behavior. We cannot eliminate this, but if things are made very clear at the beginning of the semester, and this thing is reinforced in every single class, hopefully will reduce that behavior, if not completely eliminated. And lastly, this is an important point, every single ICTIEE institution and member needs to find a way of forcing the National Accreditation Board to carry out the reforms. I was a little disappointed. On first day, I asked Deepak, I really don't have any understanding of how Indian educational institutions work. Can you tell me what are the differences between an autonomous institution, an affiliated institution, and 10 other keywords? And he said, don't worry, we have a person from National Accreditation Board who's going to show up tomorrow and explain all those. And the first thing the person did was to say, I'm not going to talk about accreditation. He took the easy way out. So we have to put pressure in trying to bring reforms in the Indian educational systems and give people more autonomy and recognize people for their own creativity and their own upkeep. Things stop now. That's all.
Okay. One more. Okay, let me comment a little bit on something that came up here, the issue of autonomy. And I'm slowly, I've been at this for almost 10 years, and I'm slowly beginning to understand those different types of colleges. And I see that you're waiting to make a comment. Are you? No, okay. So that's I think we had a meeting, World Bank, but a couple of years ago, we had a meeting where we discussed some of these issues. And it appears that the autonomy is important for institutions to transform themselves. And so the earlier the sooner institutions become autonomous, I think the more chances of them improving their quality of their engineering education. But that is not sufficient. Just because you're autonomous does not mean you have the capacity to improve yourself. You have the abilities, the system, but you have to have the capacity by investing in your faculty, in your leadership, in your human personnel, other resources, to make sure that you can, in fact, transform. So that.
Sorry, yeah, I think this is the last presentation.
Yeah.
We talked about employability, which is supposed to be one of the most hotly discussed topics. So I expected a lot more people in this discussion, but I guess we had about 10 to 12 participants. We had 4 presenters, each of them talking about the key employability skills as the industry expects it. So we had myself talking from the industry. We had Rooney Morel. We had Swami from Bennett University and Neeraj Good talking from the academic point of view. So it was quite interesting that there were a lot of common themes that we noticed from each of these presentations. I've listed some of them here. Some common themes like complex problem-solving skills, system thinking, the ability to envision a system and actually design your products with a complete system picture in view. In this new word that is going around called cognitive flexibility of students and emotional skills. Okay, so these are some of the common themes that came across many of these presentations, all these 4 presentations. So it was also interesting that reflection as a use case to develop skills was presented by Anurag actually from Connect. It was based on his research work in the US, is what he mentioned. So some of the key discussion points, actually, we actually conducted question and answer dialogue sessions since we had a smaller number of people. But there were a couple of hotly debated topics. I kept two key themes here. First one is actually a discussion on how to build some of these skills. So, for example, we said that one of the key aspects of emotional intelligence was crisis management. So there was a discussion on how to build crisis management skills in academic environment. So there were actually some interesting inputs and points given. So I was just trying to say that Indian students actually learn crisis management skills because they prepare for their exams at the last minute. So that itself gives them good crisis management skills. But then jokes apart, I think we decided that group projects and team projects that actually have some frequent changes in those projects, where some uncertainties introduced in the projects actually help them to bring some of these skills. Second thing was on that was hotly debated was lack of faculty experience in industry. So this was something that was a little bit surprised. So some of them actually said that the faculty from affiliated colleges have no industry experience. They actually get a master's degree, they come to teach, and they start teaching, and they never leave the institute or move to another institute. So they don't have industrial experience. So how can they impart what industry wants to their students? So is there a possibility, or is there how can we actually help them to build industry knowledge actually, what the industry expects? So that was interesting. And somebody mentioned, I mean, one of the participants mentioned that some of the faculty, so because of this, over a period of time, they become scientists rather than engineers. So they don't even actually use the lab. So I just put it in back in here. But that is the situation in some of the affiliated colleges. So it was strongly felt that affiliated colleges have regulatory policies which restrict them to engage with the industry for a longer period of time. That is something maybe we need to really see. If we can work with ICTIEE to help them relax some of these policies, because they were saying that even if you get adjunct professor from, even if you get somebody from industry as an adjunct professor, they can't stay for more than an academic session as per the ICTIEE rules. So we need to probably see how to actually address this. But one of the concluding themes that I took away from this was that not only the students, as we also need to help the faculty in getting more exposure to the industry expectations. That's basically what we discussed.
Okay, thank you, Ravi. Ravi is another of our industry experts, works currently in Delphi Systems in Bangalore. So this is it. I guess we have the summaries. And is there anything, deliberation that in your groups that you have been in, not been reflected in what you heard from the panel discussions? You would like to add anything that you might have missed, you would like to capture this in a form that
anybody who wants to give some suggestions to Krishna, how to further improve or anything?
Let us do this. Okay, let us do a quick.
Only one or two.
No, let us do one quick think, pair, share. Okay, everybody think of one thing. Okay, one thing that suggestion that you could do, not I could do. Okay, or IUC could do. Don't have a suggestion that's something that I could do. Okay, one thing that you could do to help IUC do a better job in the future. Okay, not I could do. Okay, so you can see it's just me and this man here, and we're both been quite exhausted with this whole thing. So one thing that you could do to help IUC do a better job in the future. Okay, so and so have that discussion with the person. No, think about it. Think about it. Think about it. And so that's one question. The other question is, what was the one takeaway that you are going back with after this meeting? What is the one thing that you're going back with as aha? Aha! What is the aha moment for you in this conference? Maybe there wasn't one, but hopefully you all had some aha moment. Aha! This is what I learned. I'm going to go back and do something about it. Okay? So the aha moment and the one thing that you can do to help IUC move forward. Okay? Think about it for 1 minute. Remain quiet. My friend Sue Kemnitzer, who was the director of engineering education in National Science Foundation, was one of our speakers in Bangalore. She gave a whole talk on the importance of reflection. We don't do enough to encourage our students to reflect in the classroom on what they're learning. Reflection, that's what we just did for about 30 seconds on it. Reflect. If you're looking back on various sessions that you attended in last year, that talks about, aha. Okay, so now talk to the person next to you for that aha moment. And the one thing that you can do to help IUC move forward is Okay, let's get a little bit of feedback from whoever wants to. Anybody wants to volunteer? The aha moment or what you can do. Rajan?
So I think I've attended every single ICTIEE conference except the first one in Hubli. And I can honestly say that the quality of presentations and the participation by the faculty from different universities has definitely improved by orders of magnitude. In the first few conferences, I found faculty were really not sure as to what their role was, how to make presentations. They didn't have the air of confidence about them. But in this conference, I saw a big improvement, even though each presentation was only for about 8 minutes. And they managed the time very nicely, and they organized the slides really well. And which means that people are now learning how to follow directions so that they can then teach their students how to follow directions.
Great, excellent. Yes, great, thanks, Rajan.
I think I'll speak.
Okay, loud.
Yeah. So I have a quick comment and a suggestion, which probably all of us can do. I have discussed this separately with a lot of board members, especially with Claire, that there is a kind need for us to design something or dwell more deeper on designing, teach faculty to design discipline-specific assessment. So I think just a one kind of a 1 hour module in the pre-certification workshop, because I conduct a lot of pre-certification for phase 1 kind of thing. There is a fine need. I think Rajan takes a module on assessment too. Probably he can comment on the same. That the quality of assessments which our faculty members design is certainly not up to the and we need to develop on more and give more training for faculty members on that. And one takeaway I want to say is that we are going to seriously consider engineering education in a deeper sense for our own faculty members. That is going to action research is something what introduces something that has hit on me.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you, Archana.
Can I make a 30-second? Not rebuttal. I'll add to what she's mentioned. If I take a stone and throw it in the audience, I'm not going to hit a civil engineer, mechanical, aerospace. I can guarantee that. So why is this conference just computer science centric? There's not more to engineering than computer science.
Rajan says this every time. He is telling this on a ground.
Okay, just a quick comment on what Archana said. Again, keep in mind the comment I made earlier with the distinction between culinary research in engineering education and engineering education research. Okay, because the world around in different countries, you talk to people like Bill Oakes, Purdue, Virginia Tech, they'll make that distinction. We have to be careful that we understand the difference in order for us to be legitimately heard by the community around the world. So we should not, if you're doing just scholarly research, claim that engineering education research, I think they will see us as novices. So we have to become more professional than that. Some of us are capable of doing engineering education research, but that's a very small minority. Most of us are doing scholarship in teaching and learning.
Last one.
Yeah, last one.
Well, my aha moment was that a few years ago, I thought the engineering education in the tier 2 colleges was a lost cause and things were not happening well. I definitely see light at the other end of the tunnel. Things are definitely looking up with movements like this one. So I really felt it this time. But I yield my heart time to
Thanks. Yeah, from our side, I think we felt that there is an immediate contribution that we can do in this process is to set up, to begin with, set up a software remote lab under the ICTIEE consortium banner, and we can start offering it to all the ICTIEE members. And we will launch it. We will immediately make it active as soon as we return back and start working on facilitating it and other stuff. Thank you so much.
His first guinea pig is going to be me. But my students from Penn State, America, they're going to do lab here. So things are going to switch now. American students are going to come here for education.
So great. Okay, so we're running out of time, but I did notice that most of these comments have come from our veterans, ICTIE, IEC veterans. I'm hoping that the others have also had aha moments here that have, we haven't had a chance to share because of lack of time. But keep that aha moment, keep that reflection in your mind, and keep coming back year after year after year. And with that, we have we're going to close with the fearless leader, Raj.
So I would like to invite all BU faculty in front, please. All BU faculty and staff.
Just have a token of thank you to Bennett, particularly Raj. It's not your name, doesn't mean it's just for you.
Why did you say that?
You won't have that in. Right, so here. Come on.
You guys better come this side, yeah?
Let's all come.
Thank you.
Everybody, you've done a great job, guys.
Can you please stand up for one and the members of this team and give them a
far away. Most of you are still here till 4 o'clock. Check out tonight.
Before going to sleep, we have to check out.
I'll be downstairs at 4:15.
4:30.
The bus will leave at 4:30.
No exception.
No exception.
See you all. Thank you.